Mark, are we back?
Sam, we are back. And not only are we back, but we can be seen. We are back and producing video along with our audio. So
Yeah. Yes.
go on over to YouTube and check us out there.
Yes, we will be on YouTube and we will be TikToking again. And we are really excited to bring wildlife information to folks on a bunch of different platforms now. I'm coming to you from my living room in Grand Lake, Colorado, and Mark is coming to you from his recording studio. It's much fancier than mine. I don't know if you can notice that as you see Mark.
Well, we work with what we have, and I'm just happy to show off um, the new skill that I'm working on with my paintings behind me.
It's beautiful, Mark. Every time I see it, it's just stunning.
Well, thank you.
And I know today we're changing our format a bit, and I think it's good for our listeners to know that, and that we're going to be covering things that you and I are both working on and really focus on issues that we're facing in Colorado and in other states that we work on. But right now we are pretty knee deep, hip deep in Colorado policy decisions. And
We've got our
I thought it
waders
was
on to get through all of the Colorado policy that is upon us.
I have my new hunting pants on that just got here today, so I'm feeling ready.
There we
I
go.
feel ready. Uh, but I digress. I've seen a lot of chatter on social media, and I don't know if you ever go on social media, Mark, and see this kind of conversation that's happening with a bunch of anonymous people. Um,
I
but I've
try.
seen a lot of
Yeah, I try to stay away. It's not generally good for my health, but it is also good to see what's getting out there. Uh, and disappointing with some of the rhetoric. Uh, it can happen from both sides, but there's certainly a lot that is uh, from the hunting trapping world that's disappointing to say the
yeah.
least.
Yeah, I would say so too. I think that there is a lot of misinformation being spread around about both of us, about our organizations, about decision makers right now in the state. And it's it can be really sad to see that really spread online. And that's where I wanted to talk today a bit about one of the things that I keep hearing repeated in online spaces is that we need to use science-based wildlife management. And so, Mark, I'm wondering who is telling us that we need to use science-based wildlife management? Who are the people that are saying we need to use that?
Yeah, it is. Uh, again, we hear it, people preaching from wildlife advocates to hunters to trappers to the agencies that are in charge of our wildlife management. I don't always know exactly they mean. Like my definition of science-based wildlife management, I think is a lot different than what some other folks out there are saying. And so yeah, I'd love to dive in on that and really understand like why, talk about why people say that and what they truly intend when they say science-based management.
Right, right. And I think that's, it's one of the lines that we hear repeated over and over again, along with, some other things that we can discuss at a later podcast, like animal rights extremists, anti-hunting, out of state extremists, all of these things. And
Just
I think that
dot 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 extremist is typically the
extreme
format. It's like a
either
Mad
way.
Libs,
But yes,
extremist Mad Libs.
it's not lost on me that as I come to you from my living room in Grand County in my new hunting pants, that most of those things are not true. And yet, that kind of rhetoric keeps being repeated online. So I think starting with the science-based thing is really important. And I feel like we talk past each other in our communities and say science-based, 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 but we're asking different questions. And I think that I know we had a whole Fur Bearer Sam episode, but I do think the current state of where we are with fur bearers um, is really it really illustrates how that science-based question is being applied and also who is using that definition for what purpose. So I think that if we start, with the fur bearer stakeholder group, which you were a part of, which I was not invited to be a part of. So I was excluded, you were included. And I think one of the prerequisites for advocates was willingness to compromise. And I saw that in the fur bearer management report. They seem to pick folks from the hunting and trapping community who are the loudest. And then they picked most of us that are the most reasonable. And then they wouldn't even let me or other experts in our field join because they didn't want to work with folks that weren't willing to compromise. But on the opposite side, they picked with folks that weren't willing to compromise at all. I think you had a really great text from one of the other from a fur trapper. And do you want to share what was said in that text? Were you trying to look for compromise, Mark?
Yeah, I reached out to this individual. It was interesting. It was kind of on the heels, working on the rodenticide bill here in Colorado, and figuring out compromise when we needed to with a major or the largest pest control company in the country. And I love trying to find common ground and getting support from all sides. And so, going through that process with rodenticides, I was like, I'm going to try again with this guy, and sent him a text saying, hey, let's he was on the fur bearer working group too, and I was like, let's continue this discussion. Let's talk about whether or not we can come up with uh, bag limits, so daily amounts a trapper or hunter can take of a given species, and possession limits, like how many possession can be defined in a few different ways: annual possession, or when that animal the fur has been processed to a point where it's now something different. But let's try to work together on this. And I received a very short text back: I have no interest. So that same individual will go out there and say, on social media and the print and TV and radio, everywhere he can get a microphone or a computer in front of him to write out his quote, he will say these folks have zero interest in doing anything other than eliminating hunting and trapping altogether, full stop. And I'm just, that kind of thing really frustrates me, because here I am trying to figure out a path forward where we can both be a little bit happy and both be a little bit frustrated with the outcome, but we work together on it and found something that we could at least be agreeable about. And then, privately, I'm the one reaching out, and publicly, I'm the one apparently that has no interest in it at all. And for folks that know me, that's certainly not how I operate.
You are very willing to compromise, and
Almost sometimes a little to a fault, right? Like I want to make this work, and sometimes I got to dial it back a little bit. But
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. And I think it reminds me of earlier conversations I've had with agency professionals where I've just been like, can we please just get bag limits on these species and possession limits? Like that's what I'd like to see. And I was completely shut down by the agency on that. So I think that we get to a point behind the scenes over and over again where we're asking for common sense reforms, right? In my background, I have a master's in environmental policy. So that's really where I come from, is a policy standpoint. Where can we make these policy changes to ensure that we have sustainable populations of these animals in perpetuity, that they're always there? And so, again, despite the agency's concerns, I am also very willing to compromise. But I'm saddened, when the opportunity to compromise then becomes very polarizing, and there's all sorts of rhetoric that drives it further and further away. And it certainly helps some people fundraise, right? Like I've seen a lot of fear mongering to build fundraising online. And I think that it also serves to try to drive a wedge between the ethical people that I would say would be in my community, right? Like I hunt and fish. I am in a relationship with an outfitter. This is my life. I think that it's sad to see just blatant lies go around and say, no, these people are disregarding science-based wildlife management. No, these people want to end all hunting. And I really appreciate that we have this platform, one, to speak for ourselves, because as we know, the press often won't pick up things we say, even when we say over and over again, I fish, I hunt. I maintain personally, and this is backed by science, that we don't need to hunt carnivores. We don't need to. We don't need to do it. I am here for hunting hoofed animals. I am not here for hunting animals with paws. And I think that, that stance both alienates me from a lot of folks in the animal rights movement, and it alienates me from a lot of folks in the hunting movement. But here I stand, and I at least am upfront about who I am and what I want and what I'd like to see. And I'm willing to compromise on it. And so I would love anyone to come to the table that's willing to compromise on it, to come talk to either of us, because I welcome those kinds of conversations. And I think on this podcast and on our social media, we don't need to get into personal attacks. I would much rather debate the merits of the policies we're proposing all day. And I think that because the other side doesn't want that debate, they try to attack us personally or try to spread misinformation. I would much rather have a policy debate of, why are we allowing commercial sales of fur bearers? Why? Tell me why. How does that benefit fur bearing species? We don't have the answer to that question. No one will answer that question. You saw the agency at the last Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting avoid that question over and over again. How do commercial markets benefit fur bearing species? And they don't,
they don't. And that, the day after the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the day 2 of the commission meeting a couple of weeks ago, there were so many people commenting from the public uh, when the petition was voted on to move forward with it and create regulation from the petition itself, in the spirit of the petition. And I heard over and over again about how the science-based ethics of CPW were being thrown in the dumpster, and I couldn't wrap my head around how is not allowing commercial exploitation of wildlife going against science.
Right. And I
I've
think
chewed on
that,
that for a while and I can't come up with the right answer. So if you can enlighten me, please do, because I'm stuck.
well, I think it's important to know, what questions state agencies are asking when they look at rulemaking petitions. So, with the Center for Biological Diversity, we submitted our rulemaking petition that would prohibit the commercial sale of wildlife furs from wildlife labeled as fur bearers. This petition does nothing to set bag limits. It does not stop hunting and trapping. It does not stop the commercial sale of fur in our state, most of which is imported or, captive raised, farmed fur animals. So all it says is just for this one tiny piece, for people that are out enjoying this recreationally, let's not incentivize over exploitation with putting our wildlife furs into the global market. I feel like it's a common sense question that does not need science to address it. It's an ethics question, really. It's something that we have traditionally in North American wildlife management. It's been a traditional value of conservation to eliminate commercial markets for wildlife. So I thought it was a very straightforward question and that it closed a small loophole that was over incentivizing or incentivizing the over exploitation of animals labeled as fur bearers. And for our listeners, fur bearers are 17 different species. Just a quick, refresh from Fur Bearer Sam episode. There's 17 different species in our state, and they include everything from swift fox, which are a species of special concern in our state for conservation, gray fox, another species identified in the SWAP, which is a state wildlife action plan, as a species of concern. They include beaver, who help protect us against wildfire and drought and build the beautiful ecosystems that we like to fish in or go birding at. And they include ringtails, which are, disproportionately affected by climate change. There's so many different species under this one umbrella. And so why not take the commercial piece off the table? I think that the agency says that how many animals we kill now, it won't make a difference if we sell them or not. They didn't say anything in their denial to back that assertion. The agency doesn't maintain population data on most fur bearer species. And the population data they do have is from voluntary harvest reporting. So it's from a survey. Like if you and I went to the grocery store and they're like, rate us 5 to 10, and you X out that email, that's what CPW is giving for trappers and small game hunters that are killing fur bearers. Like, hey, can you fill out this report? It'd be real sweet if you did that. And no one has to do it. So it's completely voluntary. And then they'll say, well, it seems like, it still seems to be about the same in those numbers. So the population must be around the same. And you can keep doing what you're doing. And I think that what the agency does with science is, and when I say the agency, Colorado Parks and Wildlife staff do with science is they ask, can we continue to hunt without getting rid of the whole population of animals? Will the population survive? And they look for that maximum number that they allow, rather than asking, does this activity benefit the animal? Does it benefit the ecosystem? Is this a fair chase activity, which we ask for deer and elk? We don't ask those questions, and the agency isn't comfortable with answering those questions. So when we ask them directly, you'll see what we saw at the last commission meeting, which is agency staff avoiding questions, talking in circles, commissioners asking questions because they're not allowed to talk about anything except for a public hearing. And it looks like it is chaotic because everyone is trying to understand both the questions and the answers at the same time. Did you want to comment on that? Because I know you saw some of this where there were a lot of headlines that said, Oh, chaos at Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting. Um, what was your perception of the decision-making process on the petition at the commission meeting?
Yeah, I commented on the second day, extending my sympathy to the commissioners because, like you said, they don't get to talk to each other outside of these meetings on anything that's policy related. And so everything that is being discussed as a commission is being discussed as a commission for the first time in front of the public, in front of the media. When you look at uh, the legislative process, it's behind closed doors ahead of time, lobbying efforts, lots of, I don't understand this. What if we do that? And most of that is cleared up before they get to a committee and discuss the bill. And so all of those same questions that the commission was having are the same questions that everyone should be asking when voting on policy. It just happens to be in front of everyone when they're doing it. And that's not their fault. We have a little grace, give them a little grace, a little compassion to understand this is when they're hearing it, this discussion for the first time is when we're hearing it for the first time being discussed. So
Right.
take it easy. And unfortunately, the media landscape that we're in is more about clicks than it is about presenting the facts. Like what the issue was should have been number one in every story. Hey,
Right.
this is what we're allowing now, and this is what they voted to do to change it. This is the potential outcome and of that policy change. These are the next steps. Leave out all the crazy, chaotic, confused, blah blah blah. I mean, I've had a legislator text me before a committee hearing saying, I'm utterly confused. This is not something that is unique to our current Parks and Wildlife Commission. And I did want to go back to a little bit on you some concerns of mine with the commercial sale piece. While you were speaking, I have a terrible. We talked about social media at the beginning and diving deep, and I have the propensity to check out fur trapping social media. And
Mhm.
I saw recently that one single bobcat, went for $3,000 for their pelt.
Wow.
And I immediately went into the comment section and found exactly what I thought was going to be said was Western bobcats better watch out. They're going to get cleaned out, or something along those lines. And it's like that is a huge red flag for me,
Right.
and like talking about the agency's science too. It's like, yeah, maybe ringtail could possibly be doing really well at a state level, but there could be pockets of habitat that they belong in that they are non-existent because they have been trapped out of existence there. So, relying only on data that is coming from voluntary surveys and not accounting for local populations, to me, is not relying on science to the best way you could.
Right. And I did not see anywhere, and anyone's welcome to correct me if I'm wrong. I've never seen anywhere. So I should say both from Colorado Parks and Wildlife and from any researcher or any agency anywhere showing where the commercial sale of fur bearer pelts and parts is beneficial to wild fur bearers. There is no science that shows that. That's not the science question being asked. I don't see any science anywhere showing that, we need to sell fur bearers to manage them. That doesn't show up anywhere either. And I think that when we say follow the science or trust the experts, it's important to note that Colorado Parks and Wildlife does have some really excellent biologists and scientists within the agency, but it's the policy makers and the leadership that makes policy recommendations and decisions, not necessarily the top scientists within the organization. And so right away, the science is asking a different question. Then that science is filtered down through leadership or through policymakers. Those policymakers make decisions based on Colorado Parks and Wildlife being an enterprise agency, meaning it needs to make money. So they always ask, well, is this going to make us more money? Is this going to cost us money? Where does money come from? And they see their customers as fur trappers, as hunters, and as anglers. And I'm a big I'm really big on fairness, Mark. I don't know if you know this about me. So even if I participate in certain recreational activities, I still think everyone should have a voice in wildlife. Everyone. And
Well, it's
it
literally in
is,
statute, right?
yes,
The
literally
wildlife of Colorado belongs to all Coloradans.
all of us. And to silence a few because the agency is an enterprise agency and sees certain people as its customers. And they do that to the detriment of the broader public and to the detriment of ecosystems because they're only asking one question, they're serving one customer, and then they come up with the same solution over and over and over again. And we've seen this since the 1990s with fur bearers, stakeholder group, report, everything was ignored. 30 years later, here we are again, stakeholder group, report, petition, agency doesn't want to limit anything. And there's a lot of reasons why the agency doesn't want to do that, but it's certainly not based in science why they don't want to limit. And I think that, if we ask where's the science showing that we have to keep doing this, they would present nothing. I've gotten nothing. I've asked for that science. I've gotten blank stares. So I challenge anyone, show me the science that says we need to continue managing fur bearers and allow unlimited harvest of all of these species and allow for the sale of them. I would love to see that science, but it seems to be easy for fur trappers and certain pest control operators to say follow the science when the science isn't there because the agency's supporting you based on a values-based system and based on your personal relationships.
Yeah, I mean, if there was truly a need to kill any of these species, they would have some sort of minimum, like, hey, well, we gotta at least kill, 100 martens, or we're going to be in trouble. Of course, that doesn't exist because there's no need for it. There's nothing that says we have to do any of this, and that is, I mean, again, in statute, hunting, trapping, and angling shall be used for all necessary harvest. And I mean, I think it's a gift that it's allowed, right? I mean, because they aren't necessary, but it's still being allowed. And I'm not out there trying to completely get rid of it. I mean, I wouldn't hurt my feelings certainly if it was gone, but right now, I like what I want is that fairness piece. And it's not just fairness for the species, fairness for the uh the different hunting and trapping groups where you get one elk but you get 50 coyotes. Like, that's not fair. It's not fair for species to be hit really hard for no reason in one particular area. uh, Not fair to have some species being able to be killed when they're raising their young and then others are protected during that time. They that part really, that fairness piece also super frustrates me. And why can't everyone just take a step back and see, like, oh, you know what, I may not agree 100% on what they want, but I can understand where they're coming from.
Right. And I think we'd never see these groups advocate for unlimited deer and elk hunting, right? Or unlimited moose tags, even though we're seeing negative environmental impacts of moose. I think that we don't see that happening. And that's because there's a different level of appreciation, respect, and understanding for hoofed species, for ungulates, than there is for fur-bearing species or carnivores. I think it goes back as to what Dan Flores would say would go back to, the beginning of wildlife management, how we valued some species over others. And we have more data on some species than others. And some of it's because it's easier to get elk herd counts than it is to get counts of pine marten. Um, Other of it is because the agencies have never valued finding answers to those questions and have preferred to maintain the status quo because of how they view each of these species. And I think that fairness question is so important. And why do we lump all these species together? And we don't do that and say, bighorn, elk, deer, that's one category and have at it, unlimited. We just don't say that. And I think that it's important that we don't lose the question about policy in this identity rhetoric that I see repeated online. What I want is a policy discussion. Give us a policy discussion. I'll have a policy discussion all day. And like you said, we'd both be willing to compromise on policies. But that's not what's on the table. They've made it an identity fight when it has nothing to do with our personal identities. I think what it has to do with is that we'd like to see balance across the agency and across stakeholders. And we'd like to see balance in which science is being used and for what. And I think that, we have to keep showing up to ensure that those policy conversations actually happen. And, I would love to see the question answered by the agency. What science shows we need commercial markets for wildlife, for fur bearer furs, wild fur bearers, to manage them? Show me that. But they don't answer that question. So my hope is as we move forward with this podcast, that we can continue to kind of shine a light on some of the behind the scenes things that happen at agency hearings and sometimes with legislative things, that we won't get personal, but we will stick to these kinds of policy discussions. And we can also kind of show our listeners how these decisions are being made and by whom. Does that sound like a fun way to transform the wildlife fire?
Yeah, no, I love it. And I keep thinking too about uh I want to do a little visualization with you.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, you ready? So we're playing tug of war,
Okay.
and on one side we have advocates who don't want any hunting or trapping of any animal ever to exist ever again. And then on the other side, we have the hunting and trapping world who do not want to make any compromises on limits on these species and or methods or seasons, anything like that. That benefits the trapping world for a while, but the problem that they aren't anticipating is if the folks that want to get rid of all fur bearer hunting and trapping get a hold and start tugging, it's going to go from unlimited to zero. Boom. And no coming back. Right?
Did I illustrate that okay with my hands for
that,
those
that was
watching?
good. Thank you for
Thank you.
walking us
Thanks.
through that. But if you brought it, if you self-policed, self-regulated, and brought forward fair and sensible regulations, it makes it really hard to move to an extreme position if you're already in a really defendable place.
Right.
And
I would
they're
would
going to
agree
go
with
down.
that.
Like, it's going to go down if they continue this hold on to every single thing, don't give an inch.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have to believe, Mark, that there's people out there that aren't all the way over here, just like we're not all the way over here, right? And I would love to meet those people and have those conversations. And I think we've started some of them. You know, at the last commission meeting, I had some pretty good conversations with hunters and trappers in the room, and we were able to talk about, you know, how species are important to us, or talk about guns. That's another fun one. But we were able to have those kinds of discussions and share fish pictures, or, you know, it was, there's gotta be folks like that though that are willing to speak up. So we both can come to reasonable agreements, and I would love to see that. So again, you know, I welcome that anytime, and I'm glad that we were able to clear the air a bit and talk about science-based management. We can come back to folks next week with, you know, whatever else we're working on, rodenticides or legislation, or how that process is made, or current concerns. And I know we're both working in other states too. I would love to talk more about, you know, what's been happening in Utah or Wyoming, some states that we've been paying attention to. So let's come back and bring the listeners more of this glorious reenactments of Mark's management scale, value system scale. And yeah, I'm excited to keep connecting with folks through this space.
Yep. Same here. And I am so happy to be back on the Wildlife Wire with you, and new format, and hopefully our listeners and our viewers enjoy. This has been an episode of the Wildlife Wire with me, Mark Searles, and my co-host, Samantha Miller. Thank you for listening.